There is a moment in the life of every nation when the distance between policy and human suffering collapses entirely. In Argentina, that moment arrived in December 2001, not gradually, but all at once, like a structure that had been quietly hollowing from the inside, finally giving way under its own weight. Picture Buenos Aires in that final month of the year, a city of extraordinary elegance, of wide European boulevards, and a middle class that had spent decades believing itself insulated from the poverty that afflicted its neighbors. That belief died in December 2001. Unemployment had reached 25%. The peso was about to lose two-thirds of its value in a matter of days. Ordinary families, teachers, engineers, doctors, lined up at ATMs that had already been emptied. The government froze every personal account in the country. People could not access their own savings. Not a portion, not a reduced amount, nothing. The policy was called the Corralito, the little enclosure, and it penned an entire population inside a financial crisis they had not created and could not escape. 5 presidents held office in a single month. The streets filled with the sound of pots and pans beaten against railings. Supermarkets were looted. Tear gas drifted through the same boulevards where, just years before, Argentina had presented itself to the world as a model of emerging market stability. The model had failed, and in its failure, it had left behind something that certain people in certain offices in Midtown Manhattan were watching with great professional interest. On December 23, 2001, Argentina announced the largest sovereign debt default in recorded history, $100 billion. For 37 million people living inside its consequences, it meant the destruction of savings, the collapse of businesses, the evaporation of retirement funds. For a small number of investors operating in the world of distressed debt, it meant something else entirely. It meant opportunity. Paul Singer founded Elliott Management Corporation in 1977. In the decades that followed, Elliott grew into one of the most feared hedge funds in the world, building a particular reputation in distressed debt, purchasing the financial obligations of governments in crisis for a fraction of their face value, then pursuing full repayment through litigation. Elliott did not negotiate. Elliott litigated. It pursued debtors through courts across multiple jurisdictions with the patience and resources that few counterparties could match. When Argentina defaulted, Elliott's subsidiary NML Capital acquired Argentine bonds with a face value of approximately $630 million. The price it paid was in the region of $48 million, roughly 20 cents on the dollar. What NML Capital did next would define the legal and economic history of sovereign debt for a generation. It refused every restructuring offer Argentina made. Between 2005 and 2010, 93% of Argentina's creditors accepted restructuring terms, took their losses, and moved forward. NML Capital declined every time. The legal strategy that followed was meticulous and patient. NML Capital sued Argentina in United States federal courts, grounding its argument in a critical detail. Argentine bonds had been issued under New York law. That small concession to investor confidence became the mechanism through which a single hedge fund brought a sovereign nation to its knees twice in 13 years. In 2012, US District Judge Thomas Grisa issued a ruling that sent shockwaves through the international financial community. Argentina was ordered to pay NML Capital $1.33 billion plus interest. But it was the injunction accompanying the judgment that alarmed the world. Grisa ruled that Argentina could not pay its restructured creditors unless it simultaneously paid NML Capital in full. Argentina's choice was binary: pay everything NML demanded, or pay nobody anything at all. The mechanism was devastating in its precision. Argentina processed creditor payments through the Bank of New York Mellon. Grisa's order told that bank directly, if you process Argentina's payments without NML being paid simultaneously, you are in contempt of a United States federal court. A major American financial institution was placed in the impossible position of choosing between processing legitimate payments and violating a court order. The injunction had effectively outsourced enforcement of a hedge fund's legal judgment to the global financial system itself. Argentina's response was fierce. President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner addressed the United Nations, arguing that what NML Capital was doing was not investing, but extortion. They called Singer a vulture. His fund, they said, was circling a wounded country and waiting to strip its bones. The International Monetary Fund filed briefs expressing concern. The United Nations passed resolutions. France, Brazil, and Mexico filed in support of Argentina. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear Argentina's appeal. The injunction stood. In July 2014, the inevitable occurred. Argentina attempted to pay its restructured creditors. The Bank of New York Mellon could not process the payment. Argentina had not paid NML Capital. The payment did not go through. Argentina was in technical default for the second time in 13 years. Not because its economy had collapsed, but because a court order made it structurally impossible to pay one group of creditors without first satisfying another. Bondholders who had accepted restructuring in good faith found themselves unable to receive payments. Argentina was actively trying to make. The standoff ended in 2016. Argentina paid NML Capital $2.4 billion. 48 million had become 2.4 billion over 15 years, not through economic activity, not through production or innovation or risk in any conventional sense, but through the patient deployment of legal resources in American federal courts. The return was extraordinary. It was also entirely legal. What lingers is not the money, it is the architecture. The legal infrastructure that made this possible was not built for this purpose. Contract law, jurisdiction clauses, the pari passu principle, these were instruments designed to protect financial markets, not to allow a single fund to hold a sovereign nation in legal paralysis for over a decade. And yet that is precisely what they permitted. The distance between a legitimate legal right and an act the United Nations formally condemned turned out to be, in this case, no distance at all. The tactics refined against Argentina have since been deployed against Peru, Congo, Zambia, and Greece. There is no international treaty preventing a hedge fund from purchasing a country's debt in crisis and refusing to participate in collective restructuring. Paul Singer remains one of the most significant donors in American conservative politics. He has funded hospitals, universities, and civic organizations. He is regarded as a philanthropist. He has committed no crime. The $48 million that became $2.4 billion did so through courts, through contracts, through legal frameworks, functioning exactly as designed. That is perhaps the most unsettling conclusion of all. Not that someone broke the rules, but that someone followed them so completely to such devastating effect that an entire nation defaulted twice. And the weapon was a court order. Some weapons do not look like weapons. Some of the most consequential acts of financial destruction in modern history have been committed not in shadows, not in violation of any law, but in federal courtrooms and bond contracts. Argentina learned this at enormous cost. And somewhere, in a capital city that has not yet defaulted, bonds are being issued under foreign law and the secondary markets are waiting.